Përshëndetje motra, mirë se keni ardhur në Trime podcast.
I'm Leonarda.
I'm Lejla. Welcome home.
We've got a very exciting guest today. Me and Lejla have been waiting ages for you to come. I remember we had this conversation in the beginning of September, and by the end of it we were like, yes, we want this guest on our podcast. So please introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you. That's very kind of you both, and thank you for having me here. My name is Fitore. I'm from Kosovo. Originally, I was born in Mitrovica. I came to the UK in 92, so just before I turned 9. I'm currently working as a service manager for a domestic abuse charity, supporting survivors of domestic abuse, and particularly working with marginalised communities, ensuring that they get the right advocacy and the support that they need. I also write as a way of expression, and everything that I observe or anything that really touches me, whether that's through clients at work or whether that's family or friends or interactions that I've had, one way of my processing is writing. And it helps me manage those emotions that come up, but also articulate and process what is happening, because sometimes the exposure of the experience can be quite profound, and that's my way of regulating. I also love nature. That's another way of my regulating. So gardening is one thing for me. I love being outdoors, and that's where I even live now, outside of London. But yeah, and on the weekends I volunteer for the Albanian school Kosovo, which is been going for over 30 years. So I service manage that as well.
I used to go as a kid.
You did?
Yeah.
I heard on one of your podcasts.
Poor Barbie Nakacho. We didn't go every Sunday, but as often as we could.
Yeah. The first school that was set up was in Edgware Road. So in the hotel, Clarendon Hotel, that Donika mentioned, that she was there part of a collective. And that's where they set up the first school. There were throughout the 30 years, the school was actually running over 30 different schools. It was operating on a very different way, because there was a completely different need at the time to exist. And it was more about, ensuring that everybody was able to remember their roots and to identify. And in the early 90s, people still had a very strong hope that they would go home back to Kosovo quite quickly. So they didn't want their children to lose the language. They wanted them to sort of be on par with if they were to go back to Kosovo. So
do you know that that's so amazing to have that insight, because obviously we were either survivors or came over as refugees and asylum seekers, but I guess we didn't understand the mentality of the adults. The fact that actually a lot of the adults did have that hope that they were going to go home. Because there's a big misconception that anyone who comes as a refugee or asylum seeker or an economic migrant doesn't want to go home.
No, ours was definitely one of those that my parents thought that they would be here for a maximum 3 months and we'd all be going back. Everything would be just beautifully waiting home, and here we are 30 odd years on and we haven't gone back home, and the home that we left obviously no longer exists. Doesn't even bear much resemblance really, from the loss of people to so coming from Mitrovica, our homes were burnt, so we lost everything, all memories and every sentimental attachment that was there gone. So when I do go back, I do look for that. But every year I've learned to now sort of get more acquainted with the new Kosovo and not the one that we left behind.
There definitely has been a huge progression. Maybe not as, a lot of people don't view it as progression, but there definitely has been. And what I really want to know is that being like the heart of the community here in London, I say London, of course, London isn't the whole of England, but I'm just talking about the Albanian school, what that experience has been like and how that's impacted your identity as an Albanian woman who has gone very much against the grain and our culture, and what kind of reception you've had as a result of you not necessarily conforming to that typical traditional Albanian woman role?
Yeah. I've never been the traditional Albanian role. Sometimes I have tried to conform. I have tried to sort of operate within those boundaries that culturally have been established for women, and the gender roles that are expected of young girls and young ladies, and obviously once you're married and so forth. But it's interesting that you say that, because it was never with the intention of going against the grain. It was with the intention of staying true to myself. There wasn't much language or conversation between adults and children during the transition. Well, not even the transition, during, the move to the UK. So for me, the only thing that I had was try to stay certain in my experience. So I had to constantly say to myself, this is happening or this is happening, because there was no one to tell me that, right, we're moving to England and it's going to be like this, and it's, none of that. You kind of just went with the flow. It was really interesting, because when we came to the UK, we got one of the last flights in that didn't need visas.
Right.
So we came with our Yugoslavian passports at the time, but the last flight was leaving from Sofia. So we actually drove. My late uncle, drove us to Sofia, and then we got the flight into England and landed at Heathrow, and then we were taken into what, to me as a young child, what I remember, and this could be a very, it's just a memory, was this what feels like a detention centre. It was huge, and it had many other races. It had many other, it was a very difficult environment to come into, from what we'd known as a, beautiful home with much love and warmth. And to come into that cold space felt just very overwhelming. And I remember that. Luckily, we didn't stay there too long, and then we were moved to a hotel in Finsbury Park, and I'll never forget the name, Costello Palace, and it was awful, absolutely awful to be there, because we had no cooking facilities, no access, and then my mum became very poorly, and we had no childcare, so. My brother was 4 at the time. My elder sister was 12. So my elder sister and my middle sister are both very close in age. So they had to take care of us whilst my dad went to the hospital with my mum. So it was quite a traumatic experience looking back. At the time, you don't know what's happening. But I was very, very glad when my dad went and found us a place in Kensington. And that's why then we ended up in quite central London. And then I grew up there for the remainder until in 99 we moved into Chelsea, and then when I got married I moved outside of London.
And what was that transition like then for you, that moment where you said, I've never conformed really, especially not to those gender roles? What was that transition like between then having to meet the expectations, or actually not meet the expectations of the family, of the wider community?
As I said, I was strongly influenced in my Albanian roots. So my dad had a great influence in our conditioning, and very much in who we need to be and how we are expected to behave and what can be done. And at the time, I'll never forget that I was socializing with local children in the local area. And I remember some other men going up to him and saying, I was very young at this time, so between 10 and 13 at most, and just saying, oh, your daughter's socializing with English people, and that clearly must have played a role in me, because then very quickly I developed very strong relationships with some girls who are Albanian and with whom I'm still friends with, but they all lived in North London. So I used to go to school in Holland Park, so I decided to go every day from Chelsea to Hampstead, because that's where the Albanian girls were. And that's still where majority of my friends live, and I'm still in the other part of the world. So there was that travel was there, but it was to have that connection and to have that belonging, but also I think to stay away from those judgments, really, and to make. I already felt that my parents' life was difficult in the UK, and I didn't want to add to it. Saying that, even when I went to school, and it was very interesting, and I'm going to use the language that was used at the time, that it became the Albanians, the whites, the English, and the African Caribbean. It can be from any part, but there was quite a segregation, and we had to kind of stand our own. And then we linked. Whilst at school, we linked more with the, people from Jamaica or from Bahamas. There was that cultural identity and that sense of belonging, because we'd had the similar historical experience, I guess, in the sense of oppression and parental, the way we were raised. They knew what it meant to be thrown with a slipper, and they knew what was waiting at home if you were late. Not that my mom ever did this, but the threat of it was there. And so it was a really interesting experience at the time. But I think the greatest challenge for me came when I made the decision to marry outside the culture. And that wasn't received well at all. And it was really quite a difficult time, because I really enjoyed all my friendship groups that were in Kosovo, and I loved seeing my family and extended family. And it wasn't, now in hindsight, people may not recognize how much of an impact it had, and the things, because it's interesting how people forget what they say to you. And I remember saying, as somebody very close to me said, you have to choose him or you have to choose us. And I looked and I thought for a minute, and I was just like, yeah, you know who I'm choosing? I'm choosing me. And I was really, really scared, because I know what had happened from stories, even in my family, in further, not family of origin, but a bit further, that when somebody married outside, and how she was beaten by her brothers, and how she was ostracized, basically, and, what that meant. And then I had a lot of, your grandparents would turn in their grave if they knew this is what you're doing. You're going to completely assimilate our culture, and, where's everything we've taught you and the way we brought you up. And it was very, very, very hard in that sense. And it was very hard that a lot of people that I considered my friends and family at the time did turn their back and weren't as engaging and receptive. But then as time went on, and they saw that just because I've married outside the culture, I haven't changed. I did not change the way I engage with people, to the way that I carry myself at home, or the way anything about me didn't change. The only difference was that my husband was no longer Albanian. So, but I knew that in order for me to stay true to myself, I wouldn't be able to be at that time with a man that from our culture, because it meant having my say and having what me and my husband would agree on be respected and acknowledged, and not really having to go through 20 other people to make an agreement, or for somebody to tell me how they're going to educate my children, or how I had somebody who would tell me how I should wear my hair and how I should, talk, and or being told, what's educated, what's not, what's acceptable, what's not. And I knew that actually to be with somebody, it's not just love that you need that respect, and you need that understanding. And I needed that certainty as well, that as a partnership in this life, we can work together. Absolutely. And we will make our decisions and not have to consult the mum, the dad, the aunt, the sister-in-law, the brother-in-law, the whoever else, because there were a lot of people out there that also influenced. Even if you'd agreed with your partner, there was a lot of influence from others. And I knew that I wasn't a sort of personality that could allow that and conform to that. Not that I think there's anything wrong to if other people can tolerate that. That's absolutely, all credit to them and all respect to them. But knowing myself and knowing, to me, there's nothing that I value more than freedom.
And that's it, isn't it? Yeah. It's the fact that I think everything you're saying when you're saying that this is the kind of relationship that I wanted, actually what you're explaining is freedom.
Yeah.
Is that sense of having that relationship where you and your partner have that understanding that we are meant to be equals, and where we can't be, then we share power, and in particular it's men who hold power in our society. But if they do have the power, then they share that amongst their peers. And I'm wondering how much of this had an impact on you as a mother who is raising daughters.
So that's really interesting, because in order to stay afloat here and survive in the UK, mind you, even being born a third girl in our culture required me to become quite independent, and I was quite courageous and quite fierce because it got me seen. Otherwise, and it was like, oh, chura sidyal. Actually, they would even abbreviate my name Tolke or Toli or Al Capone or Mafi. So I had to, in order to do that, that's the way they saw me. And so I developed that role as a coping mechanism. I didn't know, obviously. The only reason I know this is, again, hindsight, because I have been able to do the work, and now I understand how we develop these personality traits and where they come from. So, and with that, I always thought being such a strong character that I actually will only have boys. And it's so interesting, because I was like, there's no way that out of this body, a girl will be delivered. It just didn't compute for me at all. I was like, there's going to be some fierce, like, crazy boy coming out with a sword. That's the kind of idea that I had in my head, because that's how culturally what I heard around me.
Yeah,
she's very strong. She's very sidyal. She's like a boy.
Trime.
Boy, and it was more. It was done in such a, wonderful way that, obviously, if you have all these traits, surely they can only belong to a boy, because boys are these prize possession, and only boys are this strong, and only boys are these courageous and brave, and so on and so forth. So that's why in my head I was like, I'm going to have boys. And so, being a mother of girls, it's taken me a while to actually get to that point, because when I had Leonarda, my first daughter, Leonarda had her name before she was even born. So as I grew up, and as I started to take a step back from our community and really figure out what's happening and who am I, and then when I decided to have children, I was like, Leonarda, if I have a girl, and it was really interesting because my former partner, he was Albanian. And I always say to him, if I have a girl, then I'm going to name her. And he said, okay, because of course, if we had a boy, it would be him and his family who'd be naming him. And mind you, they were lovely, lovely people. And I will, I had some great memories there. And I said, okay, but if we have a girl, her name's going to be Leonarda. And everyone questioned why. I said, because Leonarda, me lindi andra. Kur të lind një vajzë, do të më lind një andër. And that's, for me, what it meant. So when I met my husband, I was just like, right, if we have a girl, her name's going to be Leonarda.
I've got it all figured out.
Yeah, and he was just like, can I pronounce that? I said, well, you're going to learn. So,
lucky there's no J in it.
Oh, God. It was it was quite funny, because even with the other children, he's like, please, can we ensure that I can pronounce the first names. So how did it influence me? I had my first daughter, and that was absolutely fine, and it was just wonderful, because she was just beautiful.
And how old is she?
She's now 15.
Wow.
Yeah, she's now 15. And I was still very much under the cloak of what it means to be an Albanian mum.
Yeah.
And I was raising her to the way that I was raised. I was operating as a mum and a wife and a daughter and a sister to the way that I saw my mum be. And that was you know what, my mum is an amazing woman, and she has achieved a great deal for herself, and she's always been a great example. But like all of us, we all have our limitations. What we're not exposed to, we cannot supersede, and we cannot teach that which we do not know. And, you know, she taught me everything she knew and what she felt was acceptable and what she felt would make my life as easy as possible. And I appreciate that. And when I had Leonarda, I had a lot of respect. My respect for her was there, but it increased furthermore, understanding as a parent what you have to do. But then when I decided to have my second daughter, well, I decided to have a second child because, of course, I had to have a boy.
No,
not more.
A boy
I
at
had
least.
to have a boy. This was what was expected. I had to have a boy. And not that it was expected with my husband or from my husband, but in my head, in our culture, in my conditioning, I had to have a boy. Especially my husband's an only child, so I was like,
I relate to this so much,
we have to, you know, keep his family name going. The
bloodline,
yeah, absolutely. I owe it to him. I felt like I was indebted to actually give birth to an heir to his family. But this was not something that he ever said to me. This was from our culture, what I'd observed in our culture and what it meant to be born a girl in our culture. Actually, which brings me, because I've written a book which I have yet to publish, but I did write a poem in my observation of what it meant to be born a girl. And that's what the book's going to be called. It's going to be called When I Was Born a Girl. And the reason I also wanted a boy, because I didn't want my daughters to experience or to be seen less than, to be a girl. So I didn't want that. I didn't want that responsibility in me giving birth to a daughter that could be seen less than or treated less than because of her gender. And that's not because somebody directly said to me, Fitore, you have to give birth to a boy, or that's what is expected. Absolutely not. Nobody ever said that to me. But it is exactly what I heard culturally and in the community. Yeah. And it was further enhanced whenever I first girl, it's fine. Then, chica. And then when you say third girl, it's like, treta chica. Yeah. You know, and it being the third girl, there was a direct rejection to that. Okay. And I grew up with that. I grew up knowing that. And it was actually quite, now when I think back, the stories that I was told as a child, and I was told that when I was born, and they found out my gender, that my grandmother cried, my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother. And one of my uncles said, about my mum, she can only give birth to girls, and da-da-da. So it was seen as a very, quite a disempowering statement, but also how rejecting for a child. Yeah. And for the adults that told me these stories, it shows you the level of insight that they have in how it impacts a child's identity and how they feel loved and connected to their community, to their family, and so on. So I always felt like I had a point to prove that actually, although I'm the third girl, I have to work harder. I have to, stand out. I have to be stronger. I have to do, look, I'm worth your time kind of thing. Again, this was not because it was said directly to me, because I know that when I've tried to have these conversations, like, but
it's what's ingrained, and that's
the silent expectation.
Yeah, and the thing is I had the exact same, very, very similar experience. It can't ever be exactly the same. But when I went to my gender scan with Bella, I had the exact same mentality. In my head, just like you say, it was going to be a boy. And when the sonographer said, "Oh, congratulations, you're having a girl," I felt like my whole heart just went to the pit of my stomach. Yeah. Because I'm processing a lot as you're talking, because I just feel so seen by your words. Like you're articulating something that I haven't been able to articulate for myself. Yeah. And that notion of, okay, maybe I didn't meet their expectations elsewhere, but let me at least meet this one.
Yeah, Exactly.
And that's how ingrained that is in us as women in our community.
Absolutely. And it's very prevalent even to this day, because actually no further than last year, it's quite funny, but not so funny. We were in Rugov. We're huge fans of Pay, and there was a lovely, lovely gentleman who was hosting us, and then he said, so how many children do you have? I said, I've got these 3 girls. He said, they're beautiful. I hope, dipaj me yet, and so on. It's like, right, you should be trying for a boy. Never met the man in my life, ever. My husband was sitting right next to me, and I said, I've heard this quite a few times, and, many people are saying, he said, well, let me be the last one to say it to you, and you should definitely go ahead and, have a boy. Whoa. And I was like, well, it's not really that simple, it doesn't happen that way, but thank you very much, and I'll take it into consideration. Yeah. But to me, it just shows...
You're horrified. She's horrified. Yeah.
It's because it's the audacity.
But it's not seen as an audacity. Yeah. They think they're doing you a favor by, telling
like
you to
encouragement.
Absolutely, you should. And everybody had, because you're like, well, you've got to think about the economics of the situation. You've got to think about the health, and you've got to think about all the different aspects that play a part into deciding to have another child. And he's like, don't worry, they will all come with, when the child is born, it will be a boy and you'll be fine. And I was just like, because I'm not supposedly fine with this girl. Yeah. So, but this was something that had been echoed to me from after having Leonarda continuously. Everyone would be like, give it another try. Yeah. You're still very young. Every time I'd go to Kosovo or I'd meet someone here, your mum had 3 girls and then she had a boy. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do.
It's what you're supposed to be aiming for.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when I had Elena, my youngest daughter, it was it was really, really, really heartbreaking, because just not the experience, but part of that in what it triggered in me, because when I held Elena, and I instantly obviously fell in love with her, but it took for me to have a 3rd daughter to actually know that a 3rd daughter can be loved. So, because you hear so much, you hear so much. Even to this day, it takes so much, and it's quite. People don't realize that what these judgments and what these comments actually do, and how it impacts. And now, through loving her, I've also learned to begin to love myself, because I never saw myself in the light that other people saw me. I never, because my elder sister was incredibly smart and beautiful and everything else. My middle one, same. It's just like, she's the strong and the brave one. That's all I saw myself as. And by having Elena, and when I see her, and I'm like, well, actually, no, my parents did love me despite what the community says. And it was a brilliant time to have her, because I was in Italy at the time. I was living in Italy, and I'd met a family from the US, but originally from South Korea. And when I told them that I was having a 3rd daughter, they said to me, actually, that is really, really lucky in their culture. And I said, oh, really? How so? And she said, oh, because in South Korea, when you know that you're having a 3rd daughter, people ask for the daughter's hand in marriage before she's even born. Oh, wow. Because they consider it as such good luck to have a 3rd daughter. And from then on, I started to actually really change my idea of what it meant to have a 3rd daughter. And I went to Pristina, and one of my cousins who's quite religious, and he said, you've also won your place.
Exactly what Fitore was just starting to say. You have 1 daughter, you're blessed. You have 2, you're blessed. And you have 3, and you do the genetic teaching. Yeah. As long as you raise them and you teach them in the right path, you are the richest person on earth. You know, if you ask a practicing Muslim man, when you tell him, oh, I've got 3 daughters, they always say to you, yeah, Ma, you are rich. You are rich. You are the richest and the most blessed human on earth. God has favoured you over everyone else. And that's, while you're talking about this, I feel so... I don't have kids, but I feel very seen, because everyone's like... Well, I'm the oldest daughter, and I I am loved, but I'm also seen like you, brave, confident. You know, I take on so many roles because I'm the oldest. But when it comes to me and my husband, everyone is very much like, you need to extend the family. You need to do this. Por hatre prenved borit, por hatre borit, por hatre no. It's just sad. And we're just at that age where we're like, we don't want another Leo on this earth. Thank you very much.
But you know, it's what you agree on and what you feel is right for you and your family. It's not what others. It's not for others to say how the decisions that you should be making.
Exactly, and it's interesting. My sister, I've got a nephew. We've got a nephew, and we've got more pregnancies. Alhamdulillah. But when she found out, because I really wanted it to be a girl. And I always say, if by some miracle I end up pregnant, I just want girls. It's not that I don't want boys, but I'm a very girls. Like, I love having girls. And because of the religious aspect, I would, girls hold such a high regard in Islam. So I'm always like, I would rather just have a girl, like musmanin. But I just don't care about the gender. So when my sister had my nephew, everyone was so happy. And she was so offended. She was like, I was so offended because mu smakani ash djall, ash cheek. Smakani hitch. And everyone around her was like, o sa me facet paskadol me djall. Tash banis, I didn't saw dush chika. Yeah. It's just
because then also it's like, well, what is my value then as a woman? How do you see me? If the praise is coming from having a boy,
absolutely.
How do you view me?
As lesser than.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's why I said when I was in my very naive stage and growing up still, I just said I don't want to have girls because I don't want them to feel that. I don't want them to feel less than just because of their gender. But actually, I am spiritual and I believe in a much higher power than us. And that's the higher power had completely different plans for me. Yeah. And it was to show the world that this is how you raise girls. And now that's been, it's been something I had to come to terms with, that I am a mum of girls. And now I take great pride in being a mum of girls. But I also take a great responsibility with that. And in that responsibility, I mean, that I'm Albanian and I'd like my girls to be culturally aware. And I would like, and it's hard to navigate. How do you navigate the being Albanian whilst also being British as well here? But being mindful that we're also raising girls now in a society that's increasingly becoming more aware of diversity. So those questions and those discussions are coming more to the foreground. Equality is, we've started those discussions, so we're heading in the right way. Yes, there's masses and masses of work that still need doing, but we've started to progress in the right way. So for me, what does it mean for me to be a mother of girls? To me, it means that I have to teach my girls how to be authentic, how to be who they are, and to find value in themselves. And the only way that I can do that is by finding value in me and by modeling that behavior, not through martyrdom, but through compassion, through understanding, through reflection. There's been a lot of therapy involved. So
and this is it, isn't it? Because first of all, I feel like I'm sitting in the best coaching session ever. First and foremost, like as a woman, as a mum, and also as an Albanian woman who is a mother. Like honestly, like I just feel so seen and heard by your words. And this is it. I couldn't relate more in terms of having to do that work on yourself as a parent, as a mother, because how can you parent other children when you don't have that instilled in yourself? It is almost an impossible task, and one that you just all end up winging and just praying that you get it right. I know most parents say, oh, we're all winging it. And yes, to some extent we are all winging it because there is no manual. But for those of us who do come from a background that could be steeped in trauma, that could be steeped in gendered-based trauma, it's a really difficult responsibility to carry out through life.
But I think this is where it's so important to stay in our lane. And now that I've identified what I feel is my lane, it makes it easier. And I have to bring myself back, no further than yesterday, I was driving, and actually whilst driving, I was thinking about the 12,000 other things on my to-do list, and I almost cut somebody out, and I was like, and I was like, right, this is the important. It was a very quick, instinctive reminder of what it means to be in your lane, to be present. Here and now, and not go back. We have things that come with us when we're born, so we do have that generational trauma that we bring in this lifetime, some which we'll become conscious of and we will work on, but some we will unconsciously pass on to the next generation. Okay. Absolutely. So my awareness was, okay, let's figure out our wounding. This is what hurts. So first thing was awareness, then it's acceptance. But in order to have awareness and acceptance, you have to have education. So you need to be able to educate yourself in what is it? What does it actually mean? What does it mean in society? What do the experts in the field say? And it's really interesting if you read the work of Dr. Shafali or Dr. Gabor Mate or Laura Markham or Brené Brown, they all have one collective opinion, and that's about being authentic. Teaching the child to be authentic, teaching them through modeling how to emotionally regulate. So we are responding in situations as opposed to reacting. How to find that self-esteem and self-confidence within ourselves, knowing that actually everything that we need resides within. Yeah. We just need to find a way to access it and become true to ourselves. And again, I go back to using my own perceptions, staying in my lane, being authentic to myself meant finding my people, finding people that love me for who I am. And sometimes I do forget as well who I am. And in moments of we all have those emotional turmoil, and we have our friends and family that remind us. And actually it's like, oh yeah. And it was really interesting because in the summer I'm very, very fortunate with some really good friends. And one of them described me, and I was just like, wow. That it's so interesting that somebody can perceive you that way. Yet, as I said, I'm going to read in a minute one of my poems of what I grew up hearing and what I grew up seeing of the way that women and girls were treated. So actually, I'm going to do it now because I think it will make more sense.
I feel like I'm healing.
So
I don't even want to talk. I just want to let you do all the talking.
Honestly, I'm a guest here.
I feel like my whole life has been leading up towards this moment where I found like another sister. But please, please read this out.
It's not your place. It's not your place to laugh out loud. Do not shame me in front of this crowd. It's not your place to flap around. Please, just go sit down. Don't make a sound. It's not your place to look at me in the eye. It's not your place to leave until I say goodbye. It's not your place to eat here next to me. It's not your place to choose who you want to be. It's not your place to dress as you wish. It's not your place. Now get up and move that dish. It's not your place to say no to me. It's not your place. Remember, you're a she, not a he. It's not your place to raise your voice. It's not your place. Remember, you don't have a choice. It's not your place to stand there while we greet our guests. It's not your place. Now don't. Just go. Don't be a pest. It's not your place to stand up to me. It's not your place. Now go. Go make us some tea. It's not your place to voice your concern. It's not your place. Just go. Make sure that dinner doesn't burn. It's not your place to say what you need. It's not your place. Why don't you go and get something to eat? It's not your place here in your father's home. It's not your place. Don't you have your hair to comb? It's not your place to sleep over there. It's not your place to show us that you care. It's not your place to bring us disgrace, but it is your place to leave without a trace.
Yeah.
I think to be a woman.
Yeah.
And sadly, as much as I thought this belonged only in our community, before I went and started working with survivors of domestic abuse, I now realize that it actually is across so many communities. It's not solely here.
Yeah.
So the words that I've written, they don't solely belong to an Albanian girl.
Yeah,
They just belong to a girl.
Yeah, and you're right. We have many women from Afro-Caribbean communities and South Asian communities reach out to us all the time, and they relate to the podcast because, well, first of all, they're like, I had no idea how similar our cultures were. That's the first thing they say.
Yeah.
And then secondly, they're like, I feel like you're talking about our Asian community, or I feel like you're talking about Black community. And I think our ethnicity, because I said this before, but our ethnicity is just like, there's almost like nowhere to put it.
Yeah.
But there's this preconceived idea of what it means to be white and what it means to be European, or what it means to dress in a certain way or look in a certain way. And you know, if you'd said to anybody, so where do you live? Chelsea. Oh, so what do you do? At the time I worked in a corporate company. Oh, you work? Oh, okay. Absolutely. You're automatically boxed somewhere completely different. And this was really, really interesting. When I went to Italy, and we had a great social platform where we met people. There were other expats there. And there was quite a high-powered couple, one of which was a German. The lady was German, and she said to me, where are you from? I said, I'm from Kosovo. No, I said, I'm Albanian. She said, Albanian? I didn't realize Albanian people look like you. And I was just like,
What?
Exactly.
Sorry. I just have to laugh.
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
Because
No,
what?
but it's true. And and actually I was quite grateful for her, because Germans can be quite direct, and if we Albanians thought we were blunt, they literally hold the fort for that one. But I was like, wow, so what did you think? And they have this idea from 99, when the war happened. They saw people that, even if you put like the Queen of England or Princess Kate wrapped up in a shawl, so escaping war, they were literally being evacuated from their homes and walking through mountains, and God knows what they were seeing. Only they know their deepest experiences. Obviously, we've heard, and the sexual and gendered violence that they've experienced in that war. You're going to look very differently, as opposed to somebody who's, dressed to the nines, has just come up and said hello to you. It's, to me, it's how can you be so narrow in your perspective, and how can you feel that you have the right to say that to me just because you're German, and clearly I'm Albanian. And it was also at another event, and this was here in the UK, and it was at the Queen's pageant. And we were sitting in a really nice place, and somebody said to me, oh, so where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Kosovo. I said, oh, and how come you're here? And I looked and I was just like, well, didn't you realise that there's a royal family in Kosovo, and I'm the Queen?
That is the best response.
What did you say to a stupid comment like that?
Is. And this is the thing, the xenophobia that happens to us as an ethnicity is just like, I don't feel like enough of us could get in a room and discuss it. And what we experience as Albanians is xenophobic because, as you say, we are white, we present as white, and we have that privilege of being white. So we move through the world with ease compared to Black and Asian people, right?
Yeah.
But it's not quite with ease, because as soon as people find out that we are Albanian, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute. Oh, you're not like me then, are you?
You're people of the caves.
You're not like me at all. You're not like other white people.
I also remember being at school, though, in primary school, and kids going, oh, so what do you do for food? We climb trees and kill with spears.
God! What do you think we do?
It was that idea that, every refugee came from a deprived place, that they had no food and drink. And yes, there are refugees that have that experience, but luckily for us, it wasn't to that degree. That yes, there was poverty, yes, there was challenges and political unrest, and of course there were all those things that were happening in the background. But we had quite a different upbringing compared to that which was perceived of a refugee, and what refugees look like and sound like, and so on and so forth. So there was that blatant racism starting early on, and that's why I say, for me, it's so important for my girls to see through me the pride that I have in being Albanian. And it was really actually quite funny because Leonarda came home one day and she said, "Oh, we had to write something about themselves, and one of the titles was tell us something interesting." She wrote, "I'm from Kosovo," that she's from Kosovo.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What part of Kosovo are you from?" I was like, where'd you get that from? I Pristina, Provinces, Đakovës, Pejes. But they love, because they love Rugov, they love Pej.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law is from Pej, and they absolutely love going there. So to them, that's Kosovo.
That's where, it's Kosovo.
Because they go there, it's like one interesting fact. I'm from Kosovo. So, but it's something that I have instilled in them, and for me, it's been one of the greatest things that I could do for myself was to become exposed to many different cultures and many different people and many different environments. So then I actually can connect better, not only to the other, but to myself through the other as well. Yeah. And this is why I think it's so important for my girls to have that modeled for them so they can do the same. You know, and never. I was limited when we came to the UK. You can't hang around with Asians. You can't hang around with blacks. You can't hang around with English. Vetme only with Albanians.
That's what it was like. Yeah.
It was, and when now Albanians, especially post 99, when there was a huge influx of refugees that came. You could hear Albanians speaking everywhere, but we literally searched for them high and low. If you met somebody, then it was just like, wow, we were instantly connected.
We were having this discussion actually in the car on the way here that back then, like in the early 90s when we came as refugees and asylum seekers, it didn't matter whether I shqiptar Kosovës, wherever. Yeah. You instantly felt that connection because you just were so desperate to have your people around you. To have to hear your mother tongue, and we had to do a lot of that.
But also there was that cultural belonging that that you could connect with, and everybody had similar struggles to you, so you weren't so much as an outsider, And that was this is one of the other things that I in the Albanian school Kosovo here in the UK, that I want this to be a platform not only for learning the language, but actually to welcome anybody that would like to learn about our culture and identifies any part of them that identifies with our culture, but they find an anchor and a way to connect with their heritage, with their culture, with a family member, with, just through in that space for it to be a safe and welcoming space, irrespective of whether you speak the language, because there's a lot of judgment of, your child should speak Albanian. My eldest speaks Albanian, and but I think she just has a knack for languages. The middle one understood it to a point. With the third one, we're like,
okay, just don't worry about it. Yeah.
So she goes to Albanian school, and I'm like, what did you learn today? She goes, bari. I'm like, Elena, bari means grass. This is bali. And then she's like, oh, bali, vishe, sune. So, but it's we're starting. And for me, it's just important for her. It's not for her to have that language skill. It's more about identifying who she is, that part of her, to know that you can have many parts that coexist within you. The Albanian part, the British part, the being a girl part, whatever, and then choose your path. Choose what feels true to you. And I've been, again, as I said, very fortunate. My friends have done extremely well. They're all girls, but really successful in their businesses and so on. And one has her business here. The other one is also working in her profession here. Another one's back home, done extremely well. And, for me, I took that break after, actually, when I decided to have a family. I felt that it was really important for me to be there. And it was a very difficult decision to make, because when people met me, they were like, what are you doing? So what do you do? And I was like, well, I'm raising the next generation, but hey ho, clearly.
It's very typical, I think, in the West, especially in here in the UK. Yeah. And if you live in big cities, the first thing that anyone asks is, so what do you do then?
Yeah, but even Albanians, chapo bonte, and I say, what with me?
That's what they go for boy for me. What you expected me to do.
But the thing is, I consciously made that decision to have children, but to have children that I would raise with my belief systems, right? With my values. These are mine. Whether they choose later in life to actually follow those through, that will be entirely up to them. And they will not be judged for it. Just the way, that I've now been given the freedom, and I've got a great relationship with all my family, and have been allowed to make that decision and to have that support. My girls will have the same. But I needed to break these barriers in order for them to have those doors open. They're going to have their own barriers that they're going to break, because there's still a lot of stuff that I haven't, uncovered. But at least they know that they can do it. And that nobody's going to hold them back, and that they will always have that safe landing home. And I will be, and whether that home is that I'm there physically or not, they will have that in them. And that's what I hope to at least instill in the girls.
It's the safest form of evolution and progression. And I'm even thinking, like, as we're mentioning the Albanian school, for me, knowing that there is that how this space has transformed compared to what it was in the mid-90s when we were coming, knowing that now there's a space for my daughter and for those of us who do now have mixed heritage children, that they do have a safe space to go and be authentically themselves and also learn about their identity, so that they feel connected, that they feel like they understand their culture, they understand their roots. Because for me, that is really important. Like, Bella knows she's Kosovan, she knows she's Kosovan Albanian, she knows that's half of her heritage. For example, even when she went to school, into her new school, in the hall, they had the Albanian flag and the Kosovan flag next to each other. And she said, she pulled me, she said, "Mum, look," but she hadn't seen that in her old school. And so finally she felt like a part of herself was represented. It was there. They had the Jamaican flag, the Guyanese flag, because that's also another part of her heritage. But she's more likely to see the Guyanese and Jamaican flags all over London than she is to see the Albanian and Kosovan flags. And when she saw that, she felt so seen. She's only 10.
But this is why I think it's so important, because also the other part that happened when we were talking about going against the grain, because you just brought something else up for me, was that not only was I judged for it, my friends were judged. My friends were actually told, me fitoren po do me najta? Qysh, po do ne ti mu martu me Anglesi ajo? There was that immediate, like it was a disease that was going to be, passed on to. And my friends would severely judged for that, and it wasn't very nice. And so were other members of my family. Fitore,
I've had this exact same thing, but it's always been like, if the girls are dating outside of the culture,
but I also know, and it's now that I've had the pleasure of meeting some younger girls that grew up in the community and that knew me, that actually what I didn't realize is that it gave them permission to just explore whatever that life brings. It's don't be afraid of it. And that, again, going back to that exposure, there's another thing, because actually my one of my girls, my middle one, Lejla, asked me the other day, she said, Mummy, were there things that you didn't tell us growing up? And I said, yeah, absolutely. If they weren't developmentally appropriate, I didn't. But one of the decisions I made consciously, which is not something that's, which actually is looked frowned upon in our community, is to let your children know that you had a previous partner. That's, a big... Why are you telling your children that you...
how dare they know you dated? And that you're a real human being.
No, that doesn't happen. You clearly just married their dad.
And that was it.
And actually, for me, it's really important that I tell, because now the girls are of an age that they know, and it's like, I had an Albanian partner. I was very much in love with him. It didn't work out for various reasons, but you know what? It takes more in a relationship than just love. And I want them to understand that they can leave something, even if it feels great in some senses, but if they know that ultimately you don't fit, you don't need to hang around. And don't try and become something that you are not in order to conform and to be accepted. Find the place where you will be accepted, because it doesn't mean that that's the end of the world, or for them to think, oh my God, I'm going to break up with my boyfriend and that's going to be the end of it.
Because it does feel like that.
Of course,
when you're going
does.
through a
And when you're
breakup.
a teenager, it will feel like
it's
that.
such a heartache.
Trust me, it felt like that for me too, that it was the end of the world. But the good thing is, had somebody spoken to me about it so openly and said, you know what, I've been in love too. I've been down that journey and it does hurt right now, but trust me, it's going to go. And you know what? You can keep loving that person for as long as you need to until you find, and so on and so forth. So there is that. But there was that huge taboos and like, oh, why would you tell them? You know, it wasn't well perceived. And I'll read my other poem that I shared with you earlier, how when we share information with our children and when we forget sometimes to tell them that whatever the turmoil that you're experiencing, it's not because of them. And because children absorb that, and they're very narcissistic in that sense, that they think
everything's about them.
The world revolves around them. So if mummy's upset, surely it's because of me, or surely da. And in our culture, actually, not only was it said, it was very much the norm to be that way. Absolutely, things are changing. You know, I go back to Kosovo and I don't recognize it on so many levels. The parent-child relationship has changed. There's so many changes, some for the good and some not so much, that I'm a fan of. But what I saw and what I heard was this. Okay, it was my fault. It was my fault that I was a girl. It was my fault that I wanted love. It was my fault that my mum was tired. It was my fault because that's just how I was wired. It was my fault because I didn't keep quiet. It was my fault because I caused a riot. It was my fault climbing that tree. It was my fault that you weren't there for me. It was my fault for being alone. It was my fault for breaking my bone. It was my fault for missing the play. It was my fault when I gave you nothing to display. It was my fault for the beatings you gave. It was my fault when I wasn't yours priority to save. It was my fault for crying in despair. It was my fault for feeling like nobody did care. It was my fault when you stretched so far. It was my fault that I wasn't your little star. It was my fault for not knowing how. It was my fault for every time you row. It was my fault for needing a hug. It was my fault that I wasn't your little bug. It was my fault for wanting you near. It was my fault for saying what you didn't want to hear. It was my fault for mixing our race. It was my fault for losing your face. It was my fault for dishonoring your word. It was my fault for not being a caged bird. It was my fault for the affair. It was my fault for wanting you to be there. It was my fault for your anger and wrath. It was my fault for trying to find my own path. It was my fault for standing up. It was my fault for your empty cup. It was my fault for sitting down. It was my fault for not letting everything drown. It was my fault for the choices in life. It was my fault for the unhappy husband and unhappy wife. It was my fault for your disregard. It was my fault for refusing to be your unconditional guard. It was my fault for the aches in my belly. It was my fault for being so smelly. It was my fault for missing my home. It was my fault when everything was gone. So this is something that is echoed very much in and around our community. It's also, as I said, echoed in the work that I hear from other mothers and children that have experienced not only domestic abuse but racism that I've experienced. And as I say, it's not solely exclusive to the Albanian community. It is so. And for the people that actually say, nah, this doesn't exist in our community, I have clients that I support every day, some of which are Albanian, and have shared these stories. I have family and friends who have experienced abuse, who have experienced neglect, who still live in abusive relationships because they cannot deal with the judgments that come with if they chose to leave that relationship. So in an ideal world, no, we would have the freedom to be who we want to be. We would have the freedom. And I'm not saying to be some extreme versions of ourselves, you know, but to operate, to be able to say what you need to say, to be able to live and engage how you wish, you know, to have the same equal operating ground as your partner without the fear of being abused.
Absolutely.
Whether that be financial, emotional, psychological, physical, or in any way, shape or form, you are a sovereign being, okay? And we should be allowed to live as one, to be free in being who we are. And yes, I wish that this was not true in our community, but sadly it is. And I support clients that are actually going through this. And as I said, I've seen people very close to me that have experienced similar things. So for those of, you know, watching that feel, nope, this doesn't belong, this is a long, long time ago, sadly it's not.
No, it's not.
Sadly it's not. It's still happening. And that's why I say, in my role as a parent to girls, I want to ensure that my girls can make that decision between and recognize what is a healthy relationship and what is not, you know. And if they do recognize it, then the company that they keep, they can influence their company to recognize what's happening and what is okay and what is not. So I just hope that I can part that with them.
I think you already are leaving that with them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can't end this episode without asking you one final question, because something you said to both of us when we first spoke about this, and it's stuck with me ever since. And if it's had that impact on me, I need to know what kind of impact it's had on you and your journey as a woman. So you mentioned that when you met your partner and you talked about having a family, and your partner said...
No, it was much later. So when I met my partner and we got together, I was when he proposed to me, I was under the impression that people get married to have children and have families. That's why people get married, surely, because that's what. And it's not a conversation I'd ever had with my mum or with anyone really, because to me it was just the norm. It was there in that environmental context that that's what is expected in the progression of the relationship, that you get married to have children. So I was doing a course, and I'll never forget as well, one of the questions was, what sort of a parent did you imagine yourself to be? So I sat there and I reflected and I wrote and so on and so forth. And out of curiosity, my husband was in the same room as me, and I turned and I was like, what sort of parent did you think you'd be? He looked at me, he said, well, I didn't. I never thought about it. I was like, what do you mean? 3 children on. We were like, at this time, 11 years married. What do you mean you never thought about it? He's like, well, I'd met you and I saw how you were with family, and I thought that if we ever had one. And I was like, so why did you marry me? And he's like, because I wanted to be with you. And to me, it was just like, I know this sounds very simple, but this is in the absence of these conversations what happens.
Yeah.
And in operating out of assumption. So I had assumed that people get married to have children, otherwise they can remain as partners or boyfriends.
Yeah, they don't need to get married. Why get married? Yeah, we said this previously.
Yeah, exactly.
Why else get married? What's the point?
Well,
just for love?
Just spend
crazy.
Really, like, wow. So it was really, really, for me, it was so eye-opening, and even to this day, I just think, wow, you know, from all the readings that I had done, it never, such a simple question, such a simple conversation, but we were never taught to have it. Just the same that actually another thing which I think is really, really critical to teach our girls is financial literacy.
Absolutely.
We were never, ever taught financial literacy, you know, and we were told how to look and how to behave and how to speak and blah, 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 but we were not taught financial literacy. So if there's one thing that I want my girls, whether they choose to go down the, you know, education and going to uni and so on, that's great. But if they choose a trade, that's great too. But I want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, financially independent. Because when you are financially independent, you enter that plane on the same level as the other.
Yeah.
And you're not going into that relationship because you need something from that person. You're going there because you want to be together.
Yeah.
and not out of need.
Yeah.
And I think those needs we have to learn to meet ourselves. Yes, there's going to be certain wounding that's going to come up. I certainly still have some insecurities that I need my husband to support me through. But that's a discussion. But I don't want the girls to go into a relationship because they need safety, they need a home, they need, or I don't want them to remain in the relationship because they don't have those things. And that's what I see also with working with women and girls, that if women had that financial independence, we wouldn't see as much domestic violence as we do, because they would be empowered to leave those relationships.
Well, they would be able to meet their own basic needs.
Absolutely.
And then also what we're trying to do here with Trime is empower women to do that for themselves, but also so that they know that if they are ever with a perpetrator, they need to flee someone who's abusive, that they're never going to be without a community now, because Trime is here, and we, with our own lived experiences, know what it's like to be isolated, to be segregated, to be made to feel like we don't belong somewhere. And the fear that comes with when you're trying to seek safety it's dangerous, because then you just end up staying where you are because you have no idea what's waiting for you on the other side.
But also, even if you do decide to leave and you have made it to the other side, the extensive years and abuse and isolation and control, actually you forget who you are. So just unlearning that is such a huge step that as Trime, I hope that this space can give them those tools in order to survive as independent, authentic beings, which we all are. We just need to get, back to ourselves. And I think that will happen. And I can see Trime definitely serving that space. It will be. Because you guys have started a wonderful thing. And just the fact that it was really interesting, because I said to somebody close to me, I said, what were you doing on Saturday? I said, I'm going to a podcast. And they were like, why are you going? What? I said, just to have a chat. And it's like, in what capacity are you going? And it's this idea that we need to go somewhere with capacity. So why is my own experience not enough? What makes the experience of the other more valuable and more true than mine? I know what I experienced. I know what I saw. Okay. Although at times I doubted it too, because I was told, no, that doesn't happen here. That doesn't, I heard the same messaging. But I think this space is showing others that actually those messages were true. What you saw, what you experienced was true. And we are here and talking about our lived experiences. And we hope that others will continue to come in this space in full trust and safety, that this is designed that, because if we want to heal anything, we need to become aware of it and we have to accept it. It's only when we become aware and we accept it that then can we move forward and we can, become more empowered to move away from these dangerous relationships.
And believe in our own autonomy and live in our own autonomy and live with that freedom and not feel scared.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to do. So as we part, I'm going to part with one final poem with you guys. And that.
Can you just stay forever, actually? Can you not go? Can you actually just live here?
It's a bit small.
We'll make it big. We'll make it big.
No, but I think it's really important that I share this poem with you. I've shared it in my social media, and I'm the phoenix of my ancestors. And that's because you're the phoenix of your ancestors. You're the phoenix of your ancestors. And I think every single one of us who is trying to attend to our wounding, to our challenges, is a phoenix. And we, in one way or another, some do it consciously and some unconsciously, have actually laid the way for others to stand stronger in that path to authenticity, and empowerment. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors. I have risen from the deadly sea. I have challenged, I have found the you inside of me. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors that will not accept defeat. I am the warrior of my family, like the many that you still have to meet. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors. I'm the instrument driving change. I am the energy of power. I'm the energy in range. I am the phoenix of my ancestors. They will not lay to rest. I am the fire, the wood, the smoke that will fight, that will rise, that will protest. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the sun and all its rays. I am the warmth of the soul, the spark, the quiet, the gaze. I am the phoenix of my ancestors, the sun and all its rays. I am the warmth of the soul, the spark, the quiet, the gaze. I am the phoenix of my ancestors, the monsoon and the summer rain. I am the healer of fractures. I am the balm to your pain. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the stars and their sparkle. I am your daughter, your wisdom, the vessel from afar. I am the booming change. I am your avatar. I am the phoenix of my ancestors, the fighter of prisons. I am the gentleness of flowers. I am greatness and all her mighty powers. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the hands that fed you, the sweat that clothed you, the cloak of the dark. I am the husky and her startling bark. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the soil that brought you life, the dirt dried by light, the eagle that won't rest. I am the mind, the beast that beat your cunning test. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the welcoming host, the table of glory, the never-dying ghost. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the anger beneath your belly, the elder smoking her pipe. I am the creator of this pleasing sight. I'm the phoenix of my ancestors, the flag bearer, the signet ring of gold. I am the shield wrapped in textiles, the secret never told. I am the phoenix of my ancestors, the color of your beatings, the strength and resilience, the neglect and the outcast. I am the veins that travel through you from the beginning of the past.
That's amazing. That's so... it just, I guess it represents how we all feel as Albanian women. I think that just, it makes you think about your lineage, the struggles of all of the Albanian women to bring you to this point.
Absolutely.
And only Albanian women. It doesn't, I don't, when I hear this poem, I don't think of the men, I think of just the woman and the struggle of one woman to create this whole lineage. Yeah. So well done. It's amazing.
But this is to, even you said it reminds you of being an Albanian woman. For me, this is a reminder to those who have forgotten or who have been told that they are otherwise.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, they are powerhouses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was actually going to say, like, my experience of listening to that was different to yours, because actually for me that was more about the women who are leading movements like this, in spite of all the hardships and all the difficulties that they know. It's not that what they faced behind them, but they know what's to come.
Yeah. But we have plenty of those. And that's why here in the UK, who are making those changes, but also back home in Kosovo, that, there's the increase on femicide is just, it's heartbreaking to say the least. But there is plenty of work that is being done. Yep. And I think we can't deny that. I think we need to come together as a collective and truly support the cause of empowering women and entering that space of equality.
Absolutely.
You know? And that's where I say I feel a great responsibility when being a mum of girls, that they recognize what space they're entering and how to navigate the challenges that the 21st century is bringing, whilst also being aware of what happened in the past and how do we together progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the most wholesome, heartwarming.
I think
don't
we
even.
needed this. Me and Lejla needed this.
Thank you for being not just being here as our guest and for being a part of this movement that is going to go on and change life, but actually for healing something in us this evening.
Yeah,
very well.
Thank you so much.